Hello and welcome to Trust and Estates Weekly. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and we are here every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time to talk about matters related to your own estate planning and also those of professionals who help clients with estate planning and estate and trust administration. So today I'm going to talk about estate planning as it relates to business owners. So there are some, unique is probably too strong a word, but there are some issues that the owner of a business needs to attend to that would be different than someone who is an employee and doesn't have the same kind of responsibilities. So I can tell you from personal experience that when when dealing with your business is not part of your estate plan, it can cause a tremendous amount of confusion, consternation, additional expense, um, even a lot of bad feelings, frankly, um, and a lot of disruption to the business. So it's if you are a business owner, you are very well advised to make sure that and by the way, this does not apply only to people who are sole owners of a business, but if you have partners or if you own a business in an LLC with other members of the business. So those all of those situations, or if you are co-owner of a corporation, especially an S corporation. So all of these things, all of these situations require that you consider at least various aspects of what I'm going to be talking about on today's show. So the first thing to consider, if when I say a business owner, what I mean what I don't mean a situation where you are essentially a silent investor in a business. So for example, if you are a limited partner in a limited partnership. Okay, we tend to think of those as owning real estate, but a limited partnership can really own pretty much any kind of asset. So if you are a limited partner in a limited partnership owned business, then all you own is an interest in the business, and in fact, as a limited partner, you're not permitted to participate in the day-to-day running of that business. If you do, you may very well abrogate your position as a limited partner and subject yourself to treatment as a general partner. So we're not talking about situations like that. Now, you could have somewhat of a similar situation in an LLC where your involvement in the LLC is purely as an investor. You have no active role in the business. Okay, and in that case, aside from how the share of the business will be handled, not a lot of this will apply. Most of this will apply in a situation where you not only own the business, but you are actively involved in running the business. So we'll look at it, and where an issue applies to people who are just invested in the business. I'll comment on those as we go along. So the first point I want to talk about is if you want to have a succession plan. Okay, now obviously this is especially the case where you are the sole owner of the business and you run the business. So in that case, when you die, both the person running the business and its owner is gone. And so how will the business continue? So you need to, for example, identify successors. Now, that presupposes, by the way, that those successors can step into your shoes. Okay, so you may have other employees working in the business, Okay. But if they haven't been given the opportunity, the training, the experience to make the kinds of decisions that you need to make, it may be difficult for them to be your successor. And so, in that case, you may need to look outside the business to bring someone in, maybe temporarily, to bring the insiders up to speed, so that they're now able to run the business. Okay. So, all of this is part and parcel of your succession plan. Now, you what would be, especially if you want insiders to carry on running the business. So then it behooves you, while you're still alive, to set up a training and mentorship plan so that they are ready to step into the successor role at the time that you're no longer there. Now, in addition to whatever training, mentorship, by the way, there may be a need for them to have certain licenses. So if you're a real estate business, um, you're the designated broker officer for the company, right? Who is going to assume that role at the time you die? By the way, a succession plan is also a good idea, even if you plan to at some point retire from the business but have it continue operating, right? So who's going to take over for you in that licensed capacity, and what does it take for that person to do it? So, for example, here in California, in order to run most types of real estate services companies, when I say real estate services, I mean sales, leasing, property management, those kinds of businesses. You're required to have a broker, a licensed real estate broker, who is responsible for compliance of that business with real estate law. Now, if the business is a separate entity, then there has to be a real estate broker who's what's called, as I mentioned a minute ago, the designated broker officer for that company, and they are charged with oversight on the company's behalf. So if you have no one else in your company that has a license, there is no, even if you appoint someone to be your successor, there's no one who can step into that role. If you have people in your company who have a sales license, again, they don't qualify to step into that role. So now, maybe as licensed salespeople, they are eligible to apply for a broker's license, but they would still have to do that, submit all the documentation, the fees, take the test. Okay, so again, if there's any licensing requirements for your business, it's important that you address that as part of your succession plan, to make sure that should the successor need to step in, they have the we'll call them legal or regulatory qualifications to do that. By the way, similar situation for a real estate appraisal company. You don't need a broker's license. You need a real estate appraisal license. And depending on the type of work that appraisal company is doing, if for example, again, I'll use California, that's the jurisdiction I know best. California, if your company is going to appraise anything other than residential type properties, you need to have what's called a certified general real estate appraisal license. So if all the other appraisers in your office only have certified residential appraisal licenses, and your company does work on industrial, retail, office, whatever, they are not going to be able to do that work unless they have that higher level license. Now, suffice it to say that just because someone has a the same level license that you do as the business owner, doesn't mean that therefore they have to assume the supervisory role or the leading role in the company. A licensed broker can work for another broker. A certified general real estate appraiser can work for another certified general real estate appraiser. There's no problem with that. So as a matter of employee retention, professional growth for your employees, it's all available. I mean, you should make all of that available to your employees and give them that opportunity for growth. Okay, so that's again, that's an issue, particularly if you are the one running the company, or at least have a significant role. But by the way, you could be the designated broker officer of a real estate services company and still not be the CEO of the company. Okay, now, what that means is there needs to be a successor for you, even though you don't have the top role. Okay. So if you have an active role in the company, a succession plan needs to deal with your role as well as other people who have an active part in the company. Okay. So next is what's going to happen if the owner or part owner of a company dies. So let's say you have three members of an LLC who own a company, and um, if one of them dies, what is going to happen to that owner's share? Is it going to go to the heirs of that owner? Or are the remaining two members going to have the opportunity to buy out the heirs of the deceased member's estate? Okay, so a buy-sell agreement gives the remaining owners the opportunity to uh, continue owning the business among them while making sure that the heirs of the deceased owner um, get an appropriate payment for that owner's share of the business. Now, this is particularly important where you have a situation where, and I'm just using an example of three, but it could be any number two or more. Let's say you have three people who own the business but are also actively engaged in the business. Now one of them dies, okay, and now you have what amounts to the estate, which is just an owner but not an active participant. There's no one, the estate doesn't keep doing the things that the decedent was doing before, right? And so the other two members might look at that and say, well, it's not fair for the estate to continue to get, let's say everybody owns a third of the business, a third of the profits, because the two of us are now doing half the work each, and we're not going to turn over, what amounts to part of our share of the profits that we derive to this passive owner, which is the estate and or the heirs of the estate. And so that's why you would often see a buy-sell agreement that allows the estate or the heirs to the decedent to get the value of that share of the business paid to them. And then the two remaining owners continue on as co-owners and co-workers in the estate. So part of a buy-sell agreement typically, and by the way, for something, an LLC, for example, typically in the operating agreement for an LLC, there will be essentially what amount to the terms of a buy-sell agreement should one of the members die, and or sometimes it's even if that member just doesn't want to be involved in the business anymore. This is the mechanism by which changing control of the business happens. Okay, and by the way, this could also apply to a situation where you have owners of the business who are not actively involved. So let's say you've got an LLC with four members. Two of them actively run the business and they own, let's say, 40% of the business apiece. And then there are two other owners who own 10% each. Okay, so there might still be a buy-sell agreement because they don't want to have to deal with an investor that maybe they don't know. It's who knows, the children of the original investor, or whoever it is. They may not want to have to deal with the heirs as an investor, and so the operating agreement gives them the right to buy out that ownership interest on the death of that owner. And it may also provide that if that owner, for whatever reason, doesn't want to remain an owner anymore, he has the option of triggering the buy-sell agreement and getting whatever the compensation is for his share back. Now, as I started to say a moment ago, there typically in the buy-sell agreement will be some mechanism for valuing the business, typically an appraisal, although not always. It may be there's just a formula in the buy-sell agreement based on income or whatever, and then some mechanism by which legally the transfer of the interest occurs, might go through escrow or whatever. But anyway, those are all parts of the buy-sell agreement, as is the ability of the remaining members to fund it. So there may also be a funding mechanism. So, for example, the operating agreement of an LLC may authorize the remaining owners to borrow against the share of the business they're acquiring in order to buy out that share. And so while they may not be able to leverage, borrow in the business without, the authorization of all the investors, in the case of a buyout of a deceased owner, they may be able to fund, to borrow that money to fund that buyout with only a vote of the remaining owners of the business. So again, all of this is negotiated. It's best to set that kind of thing up at the time the business is set up, right? So that no one is investing under a scenario where down the road it changes, or there's uncomfortableness because some people think it should be handled one way and others another, and now you have a dispute between the co-owners. Okay, so a buy-sell agreement. Next, you really want to, in a situation where you own a business but also operate a business, you really want to integrate that business into your estate plan. So for example, if you, as part of your estate plan, set up a living trust, so you may want your business owned by the living trust as opposed to you as an individual. Okay, and in so doing, that ownership in the business will be transferred through the trust as opposed to through having to go through probate. Okay, now, having said that, this is an issue. By the way, all of these issues are things to talk about your lawyers with. I'm giving you, questions to ask, things to think about, but all of this takes sound legal advice and even sound accounting advice to make sure that you're making the right decisions. So, do you want to handle the ownership? Do you want to hold, I should say, the ownership of a business in your living trust? Yes, no. It may be the best way to do it, but there may be other ways to do it. Okay. Now, if you don't hold it in a living trust, then you should, and you decide for whatever reason you're going to pass your assets through a will. So you definitely want to be clear about who the inheritors are of that business interest. Okay, I'm going to talk more about that in another issue down the road. So I'm going to leave that issue for now and move on. Another part of integrating your business transition and estate plan into your overall estate plan is making sure that you account for estate taxes. So especially in a situation where what what you own in the business, the value of the business to your estate is the major asset of the estate. So, and let's say right now the exclusion is roughly $13 million. So let's say you have a business that's worth $20 million. So $7 million of that value is going to be subject to estate taxes. Okay. Now, you don't want to be in a situation where you have to sell the business in order to be able to pay the estate taxes. And so there are various ways to look at minimizing estate taxes or providing for estate taxes using things like a life insurance trust, etc. So all of these need to be examined so that if indeed you want the business to continue after you die, it's able to do so without that transition being negatively impacted by the need to pay estate taxes. And by the way, keep in mind that at the end of next year, if the I believe it's the 2017 tax bill does not get renewed in some way, so the estate tax exclusion is going to drop to $5 million. Now, $5 million is still a large number, but if you have a business that's worth, let's say, $8 million right now, and you're thinking, I don't have to worry because it's less than the estate tax exclusion, just keep in mind that come January 1st, 2026, that exclusion could drop to 5 million, and now an $8 million business will have $3 million of that value exposed to estate taxation, which could be the estate tax rate is roughly 40%. You're looking at least about $1 million. You're looking at around $1 million in estate taxes. That's assuming you live in a state with no estate tax. Now, and there are still several states that have estate taxes. I think I want to say 14 states still have an estate tax. Okay, so you want to make sure that the need to pay that going forward is dealt with in your overall estate plan, so that doesn't hamper the ability of the business to keep operating. Okay, and that kind of goes with the next thing, which is just to make sure that you keep an eye on liquidity issues in general. So let's say you have a circumstance where your business maybe has a lot of value, but maybe it's some kind of technology business and it really hasn't started generating a cash flow yet. And so it needs to be raising capital to have that liquidity to pay for operating expenses, research and development, etc. Okay, so if having additional liquidity is important for the viability of the business, how is that going to happen if once you have passed away? So what provisions might you make? Again, this can be handled through life insurance. Maybe there's a life insurance policy on the business for you as what's called key man insurance. Okay, and if you die, the policy pays X amount of dollars, and that will give sufficient liquidity so there's a runway there for your successors to take over, get familiar enough with the business that maybe they'll be able to raise additional capital if that's necessary. Again, there's lots of ways this can be handled, but just keep in mind that if you're dealing with a business that has value but is not cash flowing yet, which especially if you're in the more startup early stage of a business, okay, that could be an important consideration, especially if you have partners or co-members, right? So let's go back to that example of a few minutes ago where you have 3 members of an LLC and they're all actively involved in the business, but let's say you're the one who, generally speaking, has been in charge of finances. Maybe you're essentially the CFO, and so you have the duty to make sure that the funds are there for the business to keep operating. If you're gone and let's say the other two people are essentially the one running the operations and the other one is in charge of technology, and they don't really have a lot of experience in capital raising. Okay, so not only are in your succession planning, are you going to want to make sure that there's someone who can step into your role and keep up with the need of maintaining the finances of the business, but that person just may need time to get up to speed, and so there may be a need for liquidity while they solidify their contacts in the financial world, etc. So all of these things need to be taken into account in your estate plan, in the succession plan for the business. Okay. Next, like any estate plan, you want to review, and update the estate plan for your business and how that interacts with your larger estate plan on a regular basis. Certainly, anytime there's any kind of major change, you want to have your estate plan and your business estate plan reviewed. Now, I've talked about this many times on episodes of the show, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it today, but hopefully it makes sense that estate planning is never just a one and off thing. It is somewhat of a continuing process. Now, I had a client ask me the other day, well, how often should we have the estate plan review? Like every quarter, every year? And the answer is probably not every quarter or every year, unless there are just very rapid changes happening in your life, in your business. So it really comes down to, if something happens in your life or business that causes you to think, I wonder if this is going to impact my estate plan. Minimally, I would recommend that you call your advisor and say, here's what's going on. Do I need to have my estate plan reviewed? And give the advisor the opportunity to essentially say yes or no. Okay, now, hopefully you have an honest advisor who's not going to say yes just to earn a bunch of fees. Okay. And I know the estate planning attorneys I deal with, most of them, if not all of them, will not even charge for that phone call. So because they want to encourage their clients to call them when there's a question about whether a plan should be reviewed, because that 10-minute or 15-minute conversation, for the 9 out of 10 times the answer is probably no, I don't have to review it, but thanks for calling. The 10th time where it should be reviewed, right, can save a tremendous amount of headaches for both the lawyer as well as the heirs and the administrator for that client's estate. Okay, next, you need to consider family dynamics. Now, this goes back to the issues of a succession plan and also a buy-sell agreement. So let's say you have a business that's owned by several family members, okay, but maybe only some of the family members are actively involved in the business, and others are not. And let's say one of the family members that is not actively involved in the business dies, and now let's say his children are going to inherit that share of the business. Well, is it right for them to, these children who were not involved in building the business, are their parent was not actively involved in running the business, is it fair for them to continue to get the same kind of share that their parent did? And the answer is, I don't know. These are all important questions to ask and discuss with various family members, including potential heirs, and especially within the contexts of family dynamics. So I know, sometimes So I was invited to dinner the other day, and to some friends of mine, and they said it's just going to be the three of us. It's you're a member of the family. Now in this case, being a member of the family is a compliment because they're such lovely people. But I'm sure you can all appreciate that there are situations where being told, oh, I'm going to treat you just like a member of the family was kind of like, gosh, couldn't you be nicer than that? Right? We all know families that they treat their members pretty badly, right? So it's not always a good thing to be treated like a member of the family. I say that only somewhat tongue in cheek. But the dynamics in a family can be very difficult to negotiate. And so, as much as possible, they should be worked out in advance as part of your business estate plan, as well as your personal estate plan. And when you're dealing with family dynamics, it can be very, very useful to have a non-family member to deal with on sort of a neutral basis, perhaps help deal with some of the family dynamics, potential disputes, etc. It can also be a good idea to have periodic family meetings, maybe what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of captain run by this, neutral third party to keep family members abreast of what's going on, so that expectations are properly managed, etc. Generally speaking, the worst thing to happen is where you have a family member who feels he's been left in the dark by the other family members. And even though he may be treated exactly the way he's supposed to be treated according to a trust or will or whatever, because he's in the dark, he doesn't have trust of the other family members. It causes a lot of bad feelings. It can explode into problems for administrating the trust, etc. And so because of that, it's as best you can, you want to keep your family members advised as to what's going on, and what they can expect for for the future. Okay. Next, so this is not dealing now with the death of a business owner, but it's often dealt with in the context of an estate plan and a business estate plan, and that is planning for the disability or the incapacity of someone involved in the business. Now, if that person is a essentially silent investor, so their incapacity or disability, it doesn't necessarily affect the operations of the business. So there may not be a need to deal with the disability or incapacity, like I said, of a silent investor. But for business owners who are actively involved in the business, so the fact that they become disabled or worse, incapacitated, could have a materially negative impact on the business's ability to operate. And so what is the business going to do? Is there going to be someone to take over on an interim basis if the doctors say, well, the person is disabled but they're likely to recover, or the person is incapacitated for a certain period of time but they're likely to fully recover? So what is going to be that interim, succession is too strong a word, but what's going to be that interim plan to cover the work and the responsibilities, the duties of that individual who's disabled or incapacitated, right? And how will that be handled? So first of all, there may need to be a durable power of attorney, just like there is in a regular estate plan, as to who's going to make decisions about that business owner, that business person, who's going to make decisions about their health care. That's typically what a durable power of attorney does. Now, typically for a married couple, it's going to be the spouse, if the spouse is still alive, who holds that durable power of attorney. But in the case of a business where an individual is crucial to the operations of the business, perhaps, and maybe that person doesn't have a spouse. So then maybe someone in the business will hold that durable power of attorney. Again, these are all questions that have to be examined, discussed, understood, and worked out with your advisors. The other thing is the business may need to carry disability insurance on that individual to make sure that the resources are there for that individual to be rehabilitated and not drain the resources of the business. So let's say let's go back to the example I've been kind of using periodically, where the person is the finance person for the business, right? And let's say something happens and they're going to be disabled for 9 months, but they are going to be able to come back. Well, is that person going to get their salary for 9 months, even though they're not contributing their work to the business? And if so, how is the business going to afford to pay that salary and also someone to handle those duties for the 9 months that the person who is disabled is going to be gone? And then how is the additional cost of that person's care going to be handled? Maybe the person has to be in some sort of rehabilitation facility. Maybe they need some sort of home rehabilitation. That could very well be more costly than what their salary would pay for them to have. And so having disability insurance could be important. By the way, in a state like California, there's a state disability program, but state disability insurance may not be enough to pay for those costs. There, of course, is a federal disability program as well. But again, these government programs may not be sufficient. And so this may be an expense and a benefit, if you will, that the business needs to provide for its own survival. So it's not just for the benefit of the person who's disabled or incapacitated, but it may be that the ability of the business to continue is contingent upon that insurance being there. Okay, finally, as part of, and this is again part of the succession planning, but it could be wrapped into the business's estate plan. So there may be some sort of exit strategy for each of the owners of a business. Okay, and in so doing, perhaps there's a plan for the senior maybe let's go to the example of a family business. Okay, so maybe there's a provision in the operating documents for the business for the most senior generation of the business to retire at a certain point, and then sort of the next generation behind them steps up. Okay, so maybe you have a business that was started by a bunch of baby boomers like me, okay, and they hold the CFO, CEO, CFO, COO roles, right? And then their children, maybe the Gen X people, they're sort of the next level down, the executive and senior VPs or whatever. And there's a provision for an exit strategy whereby at a certain age, the senior level baby boomers, they retire, okay, and the Gen X people now step up into those most senior roles. So how is that going to happen? And what is that retiring generation going to get? How is that going to be paid for? How does that all work out so that everybody feels like it's essentially fair? If you know me, I don't use that word too often, but it is a relevant issue in a case like this. Okay, and again, what are the tax considerations of that senior generation retiring? What impact might that have on the business? Are their interests going to be sold to the remaining generations? If so, what kind of tax liability might there be? How could that affect the sale of those interests if the business represents the majority of their wealth? Okay, how is that all going to work out so that the business can keep operating and isn't hampered by by the tax consequences of whatever this exit strategy is. Now, one type of exit strategy is something called an ESOP. It's an employee stock ownership plan. And this allows the owner or owners of a business to essentially transfer ownership of the business to the employees. So this is one type of exit strategy. It's something you may look at, especially if you have longtime, very dedicated employees who were essential to the success of the business. It may very well be quite appropriate that they be rewarded by becoming the owners of the business. Okay. Now you may have children, but the children were not involved at all. They have their other things going on. And it may be, by the way, a function of employee retention. If you have a situation where the children are going to inherit the ownership of the business when you die, and these long-term very loyal employees, now they end up working for these kids that maybe they don't even know them that well. They haven't been involved in the business. That could cause a lot of unhappiness, a lot of dissatisfaction, and these people may leave the business, and that could cause the business essentially to collapse. So it may be worthwhile considering an ESOP, so that, again, it's a reward for these dedicated employees. So again, something to talk to your advisors about. Is this an option worth considering, and if so, how would it be set up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so real quickly, I'm just going to review the 8 points that I made. So start with a succession plan, create a buy-sell agreement, integrate your business estate plan into your overall estate plan, make sure you address liquidity issues, review and update your plan regularly, make sure you consider family dynamics, plan for disability and incapacity of someone in the business, as well as death, and finally consider what kind of exit strategy you want to have that may supersede just the straight out death of an owner, especially an owner who's actively involved in the business. So I thank you. Oh, if you have any questions, comments, as always, my social media links will be in the show notes after the show posts on our YouTube channel. Feel free to post them there. If you have any criticisms, by all means, those are always welcome. Would love to address those. If there's anything of a private nature, you can email me. Email address is in the show notes as well. I'm going to give my standard caveat. I'll respond if it's something within my area of expertise. If not, I will be happy to connect you with someone who has the expertise to advise you in the area of the question that you're asking. So thank you very much for joining me today. Tomorrow, my show, Business Lessons from the Military. We're going to be talking about business planning on 3 levels. Okay. And you're going to see, I'm going to talk about military doctrine from a planning standpoint, and how that equates to business planning as well. And then and that's at 10 a.m. Tomorrow. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to be starting early, I think, because I have a problem with the regular scheduled time. So please stay tuned in my social media for the start time Wednesday of our show, People Making Money. Okay, normally that show is at 10 a.m. But this Wednesday it's going to be at a different time. And then on Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. Did I say Eastern time? I'm sorry. All the times I give you are Pacific time because I'm here on the West Coast. So at 5 p.m. Thursday is my show, Jiggers' Place. This is an opportunity as the week ends for us to just relax a little bit and talk about all the things not associated with professional and business activities. And this Thursday, we're going to have a gin martini, one of my favorite cocktails. Not to toot my own horn, but I'm well known for making a fantastic gin martini. And we're going to talk about the qualities that exemplify a man. This is a topic I talk about to a lot of people, and I think it's something really well worth delving into. I know my nephew and I have conversations on this on a pretty regular basis. He's a young man in his 20s. He's just recently got engaged, so it's Mazel Tov for him and his soon-to-be bride. And so I think this is an important question for us to look at, but it's one of those questions best dealt with over, I usually say bourbon, but in this case, martinis. So again, thanks so much for joining me. Wishing you a wonderful rest of the day. Signing off, Marie, darling, you are